Hello, 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 and welcome to another episode of Activating Greatness, the show where we dig into what it really takes to lead with purpose, inspire performance, and create lasting impact. As always, I'm your host, Alec McChesney, and every episode we sit down with leaders, thinkers, and change makers who are unlocking potential in themselves, their teams, and their organizations. Here, we talk about the real stuff, leadership that drives culture, strategy that creates momentum, and the mindset that turns good intentions into game-changing results. Because greatness, it isn't a title, it's a choice. It's something you activate every single day. So thank you. Thank you for listening, for showing up, and for being part of a community of leaders who refuse to settle for good enough. Now, let's dive in and meet today's incredible guest. Today's guest is Krista Robinson, a senior HR leader at the Weitz Company, where she has played a key role in building and scaling the people function within a rapidly growing organization. Krista's leadership journey is unique. She stepped into an executive HR leadership role from a generalist position, taking on a significant stretch opportunity early in her career and growing into the role in real time. Since then, she has helped scale the HR function from a small team of 4 to a much larger, more structured organization supporting a company experiencing significant growth. Krista is deeply passionate about learning and development, leadership growth, and positioning HR as a true business driver, not just as a support function. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about what it means to bet on yourself as a leader, how to grow into these stretch roles, to build a culture of learning and development and elevating HR into a function that drives business results. Krista, thank you so much for joining us today. I have been really excited about this opportunity. It was actually back in February that you had posted something on LinkedIn about the future of HR and getting HR leaders together in Des Moines. I'm here in Omaha. And since then, I have just been revved up about the possibilities of this conversation. So thank you so much again for joining. And before I get started, I should probably stop talking and let you further introduce yourself for those who maybe aren't familiar with Krista Robinson or with the Weitz Company.
Yeah. Krista Robinson. I've been in HR for probably about 15 years. I went to college at Iowa State University and I studied journalism and mass communications with a public relations emphasis area and a sociology minor. So somehow found my way to HR. Very excited about that. Started right after college, worked for another large general contractor and was able to have a good foundational career there and have been now at the Weitz Company for about 10 and a half years. And it's been an awesome ride. So we're a general contractor. We have an electrical business. We're very entrepreneurial, and that makes HR exciting and interesting. So yeah, it's been great. So I'm VP of HR and I sit on our executive committee.
Oh, I love it. I don't know why, but I didn't put 2 and 2 together on the journalism background. And that's my background as well. That's what I studied in school. And then I have become an adopted Cyclone. My wife's whole family are Iowa State grads, and they live in the Quad Cities over there in Iowa. And so the Cyclones have now become like my second, my home away from home and my second team. So not that that's what we're here to discuss, but it's a good time to be an Iowa State fan.
I was just going to say it's
a lot of the sports.
Better than it once was.
Yes, exactly right. It's exactly right. I think where I want to start this conversation, Krista, is around this idea of betting on yourself. And when we had our prep call, we talked about you stepping in to this stretch role where, hey, maybe I don't know if I'm necessarily ready, but I'm ready to go. I want to try, I want to learn. And this passion for continuous learning was so evident in our initial conversation. And so many of the leaders that we've interviewed on this podcast, it's May 11th when we're recording, we're into the 40s now in how many we've recorded and have been published. That is such an important trait for every one of the leaders that I've talked to, and they've still dealt with imposter syndrome, or they're judging, should I be making this decision? And yet they still forge ahead. So I'm curious, when you stepped into that role, what was going on in your mind? And ultimately, what was that trigger or that point that said, yeah, I'm ready. I can bet on myself. I want to do this and I want to move forward in this direction.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I started as an HR generalist here, as I mentioned. At that time, I probably had about 6 or 7 years of HR experience, and really enjoyed it. I within a year or so, I promoted to an HR business partner role, and it was almost similar task-wise, but more strategic projects and initiatives within that role. And it was probably about 20 or so months into my time at Weitz that the HR director role became available. And upon hearing, that our current director was, I think, going to pursue other things with the kids and all of that, I hadn't even really thought about myself in that context at all. It was just kind of like, oh, okay, so we'll figure out next steps, I guess. So I had a good foundation in HR, but I hadn't ever led a team before, hadn't had a direct report. And so it didn't occur to me that would be something I would be considered for at that stage. And at the time, our incoming CEO, Kevin McLean, had called and was definitely kind of getting a temperature read from me on my interest level. And I was super honored to have been approached. But, again, you talked about imposter syndrome. I thought, oh, no, he's got the wrong gal. It's not me, and my mind just initially, can be a self-critical person, as a lot of us leaders are. And my mind just went to all the reasons why I wasn't ready and this wasn't the right time and it's the right role, but just, not right now type of stuff. And so I just, very evident to me all the things I didn't feel like I was an expert in. So that kind of led me to, maybe backpedal a little bit or maybe be a little bit less enthusiastic in the moment. But, our CEO, Kevin, is tremendous. He makes good decisions. He's a great judge of people and character. And so there's part of me that was like, I need to maybe borrow his confidence in this situation. He seems to feel like I would be a good fit for it. And I need to maybe take him at his word too. So, it was one of those things. I knew I had the motivation and the work ethic. There's nothing that I won't work hard at and eventually find a way to do well at. But I really just didn't want to let anybody down. And I just wasn't quite sure that I was ready. So, but ultimately, I think I've got a lot of really great people around me and supports and a husband that's always pumping me up, and Kevin and our CFO, Jeremy, and Carmen, just so many people on our executive leadership team that I could tell were really excited about me for the role. And so decided to take the leap and do the work that would come along with doing that.
Oh, there's so much good in there, but I think the important piece that you called out is when the CEO is believing in you and you trust the CEO, you kind of have to look at yourself in the mirror and say, okay, one of us is wrong. And I've got a feeling it's me, right? Like the CEO, he or she wouldn't be making these types of decisions if I wasn't the right fit. And so there was a little bit of that belief in the system, belief in his ability to identify talent and to identify potential and say, okay, maybe it is a little early, but I'm going to step into this role. And you have two things, when you talked about the work ethic and the motivation and the curiosity to do all of these things, you were okay at that time saying, hey, I might not have all the answers, but I'm going to find out, right? Like I'm going to be really aggressive in it. And so I'm curious, like what were some of the things that you did to navigate that? And, you talk about going from an individual contributor role to your peers at that time. And now, learning from each other. What were some of the steps you took to consume as much information as possible? Who did you lean on? What was that process like as you were getting up to speed and really becoming the leader you are today?
Yeah. You hit on a couple really good things there. I mean, it's definitely a delicate situation to step into a leadership role over people that were once your peers. So that was a little daunting at first, but I actually think that dynamic probably created a strong foundation of trust from the beginning. If you're moving into a company from the outside, it's like, you don't know the territory. You don't know how we do it here. I didn't have any of that, right? I had done the work. So I felt confident there. And I knew I already had those relationships and that credibility. And I understood the business. So that really, I had to switch my thinking and say, instead of, oh, this is a hard switch to make, it was, this is a huge advantage for me to have all of this stepping into the role. I love that. Yeah. And at the same time, it really motivated me to want to work even harder to be a leader who was worthy of trust and somebody that was capable of supporting the team well. So it is your first thought is always like, oh, is it okay? But then you get into it and you're like, no, I kind of have it made here because I actually come in with a lot to the role. So, one of the biggest lessons I think I had to learn early on was I had to reshape this thought as an individual contributor. We're very much like, what defines my success is the work that I do and that I do it well and that I know the details. So you really, I had to positioned myself in a way that it was like, that's not the role anymore, right? I need to be transparent and I need to be collaborative with my team. And I don't need to pretend that I have all the answers, because I don't. And so I really early on was very transparent about that. And I was able to lean into the expertise of the other people on the team and, just ask those thoughtful questions and just create an environment where other strong ideas could surface, and understand that I don't have to have all the ideas. That, again, that's not necessarily the job. So, I just think it's, as my role expanded and I started to interface with executive leaders more, I think I fundamentally changed the way I felt about leadership. And early in your career, you're like, oh, the leaders have all the answers. They always seem to be clear on everything. They're unwavering confidence in what they're doing. But I really got to see that, it's kind of the opposite. As you get into higher level roles, you're leading broad functions, some of which you've never done yourself, and you're navigating that ambiguity constantly. So it's not that you're going to be perfect. It's that you have to be able to make sound decisions from sometimes not all the facts, but you get as much as you can. And you have to be able to identify those risks and sort of create clarity from uncertainty. So it's, to me, so much of it was about a mindset shift and reframing what I thought defined success in an executive leadership role.
Yeah, you and I haven't talked about this, Krista, so I can't even say that I paid you $10 on the side to call that out. But everything that you just walked through is exactly what Velocity goes through in our Emerging Leaders program. That difference between an individual contributor, I'm going to be judged on the work that I do and the results that I create. And now you have 6 or 8 or 12 direct reports, and that's no longer the responsibility. That's no longer the job. And being able to shift that is not easy, right? There are times where I was in a similar boat where, I went from individual contributor, hitting sales quota, doing my job. And then it's like, oh, now you have a team. And when there's a bad week, you're like, oh, I'll just do it. I will just take this over and I will just run. And then you're like, wait a second, that is no longer, I need to shed that. Like I need to work through that. So you talked about the mindset shift. Maybe this is a bad question, but was there a moment that you said, okay, now I am now a manager and a leader of people. I am not, like, was there a click in your mind? Did it take a week? Did it take a month? Did it take 2 years for you to kind of be able to really feel the impact of that shift and the difference in yourself as an individual as well?
Mm-hmm. I think I was really very well, just being in HR, right? I was really very well aware, like, life is different now. It's not just the stuff I do and this, and the output that I produce. It's about something different. So I would say that was one thing that came easy to me, was I understood the difference between leadership and individual contributor, because I've been, doing trainings on that and all that stuff. But I think, the biggest thing for me was you have to be intentional to take a step back. When you're somebody that likes to be in the details and likes to be very, very close to the work, you have to be very intentional about saying, no, I'm carving time out for future planning, for strategic work, because if you're not careful, you'll get right back into old ways and become the team safety net and all that, kind of what you described. I'll just do it. And it's like, if I just do it, I'm not doing what they're paying me to do. And I'm also, not allowing people under me to grow. So I do think that was something that came natural, actually, for me.
Yeah, I'm so glad you called that piece out in terms of not only are you not doing what you're being paid to do, but it's a disservice to the team, right? When we play hero ball, it's one thing to be a player coach and to step in and, cover for a team. And that's something that great leaders can do. It's another thing to say, no, I'm just going to do the thing, right? I'm going to take care of it. I also want to, before we go into the next thought process, I want to double click on something that you said, which is that you wanted to earn, being that leader of trust, that there was this capacity for it. I can't give credit to anybody specifically, but we've had a couple of podcasts talk about leaders need to look at this as just like an unbelievable opportunity and a responsibility, right? It is something that not everybody gets, not everybody deserves. And if you look at it with that mindset of, I want to earn the trust, I want to earn the right for people to call me and say, hey, I need help, or I'm confused, or I'm stuck, or I have an idea. What you're really getting into, and I'm inferring a little bit, so you can correct me if I'm wrong, Krista, but that to me is the definition of what we talk about when we talk about psychological safety within a team and trust and communication within a team. When you have a leader that is intentional about that, you can really feel the ripple effects for a team, whether that team is 3 people deep or 30 people deep. And so, I don't think there's a question there. If you have any comments, I'm happy to hear them, but I'm just kind of a kudos and a double down on how important that is for new leaders, especially to be intentional about building that trust.
That's right. And one of the things that I say when I kick off our new managers development series training program is and this helped it click. Maybe this is a quick moment we were talking about earlier, but these people working for you have entrusted their career to you. They're entrusting you with their career. And so you're either somebody that they want to emulate and want to follow, or they trust your intentions and the work that you do, or they don't. And so to me, if I've got, now 30 plus people in an HR department entrusting their careers to me, I take that pretty seriously. That's a lot of people depending on me. So responsibility being the operative word.
Yeah, there's so much nuance in the day to day, but I do love that black and white, right? Like you're either a leader that they trust in that way, or you are a leader that they do not. And your actions, your involvement, your commitment is ultimately what decides that. I think it's so great. You mentioned the team growing, right? And we had a team before, and I think when you and I first connected on our prep call, you were bringing in new hires from all over the country, like just doing things that a team of 4 not possible to do. And now you've got this larger HR organization.
Yep.
When I guess what I'm trying to get to is when we have changes like that and the organization continues to grow, how did you actually go about scaling the team from a structure standpoint, and a structure standpoint that supported the growth at the HR level, but more importantly, the growth of the entire organization as the Weitz Company has continued to really increase its headcount over the last couple of years, especially?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, to kind of take a step back. So when I joined the company, I was the HR generalist, and I was supporting what was then called the commercial group. And so then my counterpart supported the industrial group. So really, as far as business partnering goes, there was really 2 of us, one handling one client group, one handling the other. And at that stage, the cool part was we knew virtually everything that was happening within our divisions because we touched every part of it, right? We know somebody's leaving. We did the exit interview. Now we know we got to open a rec. Everything is connected, full life cycle. We're handling it. So there's something really nice and intimate about that. Your client group knows you know everything going on. But that level of continuity really worked well in a smaller organization. Much more difficult to sustain that as the company scales, obviously. So, at that time, HR had responsibility for everything from hiring to onboarding to any retention efforts, corporate programming, compliance, transfers, everything. And so that scope just simply became too broad to just say, you take half, I'll take the other half, and we'll go from there.
Right.
So, yeah, the idea that we needed to evolve from a generalist heavy model into something more specialized was easy because the business told us so. We could tell by the way the business was moving that model wasn't going to work. And so, as you know, you don't scale a team overnight. You kind of have to prioritize. So the first major thing was creating a talent acquisition team because, that having that recruiting responsibility on the generalist basically meant when we're in growth mode, you're doing nothing but recruiting.
Whole-time job. Yeah.
That's it. Yep. So nothing else gets done. You've brought the new hires on, but you don't have any programming. You're not working on the orientation. You're not creating mentoring stuff, all the things you need to be doing to support growth. So that one was very, very clear. The recruiting demands required that we break that out. From there, it was a matter of kind of reworking some things. So we had compensation under generalists. So we moved compensation along with the benefits. So now we have a comp and ben function. Learning and development previously actually was not in HR. It reported up to strategy, which I can see good reasons for that too. But we went ahead and brought L&D under the HR umbrella. And then most recently, we've established an HR operations team. And so they're charged with that more centralized, systems-oriented and programmatic type work across the function. So it's been quite a journey, but over time, really, it was just taking that big pile of work in the generalist space and saying, how do we create centers of excellence to help across the board, and then bring in a strong business partnering team who's going to then directly support those business units. And now we have a ready-made package for them to use and go be successful and start adding value at business unit level. So we have found it to be a very highly scalable model for us. As the business grows, probably adding more business partnering. Some spaces aren't going to scale along with business growth quite one-to-one, but it's done really well for us. And it's, as you know, it's as much change management as it is organizational design, because you're moving a lot of people's cheese, the business unit and who they used to go to for things, and people on the HR team. So, it's not easy, but you can't stay structured the same way as the business grows around you. Things start breaking, and the business is really relying on us in HR to be ahead of those pressure points and making the changes needed so we can facilitate business growth. So yeah, that was a great experience. And like I said, I think it's just, we don't have to rip off a Band-Aid here. We need a plan, and we need to start efforting toward the plan.
Yeah, it's a process, and I need to pause and ask a follow-up question on this. And I think people are going to rewind and listen to that 2 or 3 times, because it was so good. And I'm like, I know the Activating Greatness audience is going to love it, but I'm like, Krista, we got to get you on stage talking about org design and change management within an HR platform. Because one thing that you said that I instantly wrote down and put 2 giant asterisks with is the business told us so. This change was, we had to be proactive. We couldn't sit and wait and then 18 months go by. It's not to say that we flip a switch and all of this happens, but we had to scale as the business was scaling to meet the needs in order for the organization to continue to hit revenue and continue to have the necessary headcount, especially within your industry, specifically within construction. Recruitment retention is the one topic that we hear about nonstop, no matter what, and how difficult it is to be able to fill that. But then you talked about, it's not just organizational design, it's change management. We're talking about human beings and roles, and we're creating some out of thin air, and we're bringing some over from the strategy department and building them. I'm curious, now that you have what sounds like a well-oiled machine here, what are some of the things that you guys do to keep that machine running, right? Like, we've got these centers of excellence, as you said, but what's that cross-team collaboration look like? Are there meetings where the whole team gets together, or how do you make sure, hey, we're running and there's not those gaps and things aren't falling into the silos that exist?
Yeah, that was my biggest concern when we had to go with this model, was because I remembered the time when I saw the whole thing soup to nuts. And, but I would say, that you hit on an important point, because when you start breaking out those functions, clarity becomes critical. You have to clearly define ownership and where are the transition points and how do the teams work together, because otherwise just what you said, it's silos and not partnership. And so I think that is something that we are still fine tuning even as we go, because it's like, it's still kind of a new structure, and there'll be something that emerges and we're all kind of like, oh, who has the ball? Who should have the ball? But one of the things we've tried to do, and you don't think of everything, is we created a responsibility matrix to say, what sits where, what goes where. And so anytime something comes up, at least you can go to the responsibility matrix. And if we haven't addressed it, probably have a conversation to have, because we don't really know where it sits. And maybe it's business partnering, or maybe it's TA. So that was definitely the most complicated part, is defining that. And you got to think, if we're still talking about it in HR, the business to some degree is probably like, wait a minute, do I go to this person or this person?
Yes.
So that becomes very important when you break out those functional areas, for sure. And it's a dance, and we're still working through it, but communication is key.
Communication, over communicate, right? Say it again, say it again, say it again. I love this responsibility matrix. I've had a couple of guests on talk about the EOS model with Traction, and it's a model that I'm familiar with at a couple of the past stops. Or, you have some type of management system. But within that, in my opinion, the accountability chart or the responsibility chart is the most important one, because now we're talking strategic. We're talking about how to hold people accountable, how to hold people capable. And now we're becoming a driver rather than just a checking the box. And I want to jump to our last line of thinking here, and then we'll come back to some of the learning and continuous learning stuff. But every conversation that I have with HR and leadership, when it's a positive conversation, always centers around HR is a business driver. We need them to be strategic. We need them seeing the gaps and being proactive and doing X, Y, and Z. And when it's negative, HR checks the box. They maybe recruit, they maybe try to retain people, and they handle payroll and benefits. And it is a support function at best. And so I'm curious, from your perspective, what does that really look like when HR is truly operating as a business driver? And this is a bad podcast question. I'm allowed one. This might be my second one, right. But I'm allowed two now. I make the rules. But what's that difference in impact when we're not just a support function? We are a driver. Because in my opinion, you start to see the impact on culture. You see it on revenue. You see it on performance and retention. But I'm curious from your perspective. It is a lofty question. And I think if we solve it, we can sell the idea and we could be billionaires. But I'm curious what your perspective is.
Well, let's start. The first part of your question was kind of what does it look like? And I think, at a very basic level, I think this is really important. In order for HR to truly operate strategically, HR leadership has to have a seat at the executive table and be empowered to provide that strategic input to decisions being made. Because otherwise, you're not really helping shape company direction. You're just hearing about it. It's being prescribed, and all you can possibly do is react. And so I think, for those outside of HR listening, business leaders, that sort of thing, that is super important. If you want a strategic HR team, put them at the strategy table, right? And so that's a big thing. And I even think about in my own career, like especially early on, when I'm still new to role, there'd be certain executive conversations where I'd kind of sit on the sidelines. Like I had an opinion, but I didn't know if I trusted it enough to say something. But I feel like in that moment, you make yourself administrative because you tell yourself, not my lane, I need to get out of it. And so once I stopped that limited thinking, I became comfortable weighing in on matters that were kind of outside the traditional HR scope. But everything has a people impact. Absolutely everything we're talking about, especially in construction, there's a people impact. So I think it's giving them the right seat at the table. And then it's for the HR person taking that seat, right? That's super important. And then closely coupled with that is then you get an understanding of the business as a whole. Why do we go after the work we go after? What are the margins we're looking for? How do we make money at the most basic level? So once you start to know where the company is and where the company wants to be, and what are those operational realities that we're faced with, and what's our growth strategy, then you start to apply your people lens and say, okay, having all the context I need, here's where the people side comes in, and we either position that to happen or we could become an impediment because we're not positioned to be able to meet those growth demands. But so from a culture standpoint, HR really is critical then in relaying those important messages downstream and making sure that what the executive team and what the company thinks that experience is actually true at ground level. And if it's not, being the one to call the ball and say, I know this business direction sounds really exciting to executive leadership, but the bulk of our employees don't want to do that work. So how are we going to deal with the reality of this is the work type that's available, but we have a lot of people who maybe don't have a good view of that. So it's super important for HR to help kind of bridge that gap between, what's the stated strategy and how is that put to life at the business unit level. So I think there's a lot of things, but when we're truly operating strategically, we're actively helping the business scale and we understand where the business is trying to go and what leadership capabilities that the business needs to have those, and how do we build those? How do we mitigate risk? How do we deal with some of the organizational health things that start to come along with growth and be the voice there? So it's really creating those conditions for people to thrive, because in construction, when our people thrive, our business thrives. So it's all very interwoven. But number one, HR needs to see themselves in that capacity as well. And we need to take off our administrative hats and put on our business hats. So it's a journey though, for sure.
Whew. It might have been a bad podcast question, but it was an excellent podcast answer, Krista.
Well,
that's a 4-minute snippet that will be on LinkedIn. The last line of questioning that I want to go down, Krista, because this conversation has been unbelievable. And I think, we're 33 minutes in, and everybody that is listening to this right now is taking notes, and they are bringing it back to their team to implement. And I knew it would be a good episode, and I am like ready to run through a brick wall. But before we get you out of here, I got to ask about this learning as a leadership standard. So you talked about how you love this idea of being in learning mode, the courses, mentors, continued development, and you have this mindset, but you also expect it from your team. And so I'm curious, how have you built and how do you continue to build a culture at the team level and at the organizational level where learning and development isn't just optional. It's not a nice to have, but it's an expectation to really be able to drive yourself, your team, and the organization forward.
Yeah. As I mentioned, it's probably a lot of my history in the role and things, but being promoted into a stretch role, I just knew I've got to be very willing to do the work. I've got to be willing to get up to speed. I don't have all the answers, so I'm going to have to go find them, because disappointing people is not an option. So, having said that, I think I personally modeled the way, and I made sure that I wasn't just running around talking about how important learning and development was. I was actively investing in myself, just like I was telling everybody else to do. And a couple things that were really impactful to me. I was fortunate and am still fortunate to be part of a peer group of fellow HR leaders in the construction space. We just had our meeting last week, and that's how I was able to really connect with someone who has become my mentor. And he was very instrumental in supporting me, and somebody that I could run things by, a trusted confidant. Hey, I'm going to rework the department. Does this make sense? So I'm not quiet about having a mentor. I don't view that as something that I try to keep on the down low. I think that's really cool. And so I highly encourage my team to find someone terrific that they too can learn from. So that's one thought, and I've always been fortunate to be in a company that supported me in that. So I was able to attend a University of Michigan has an HR executive program. So I took a full 2 weeks off, I think it was 2 years ago now, went to the University of Michigan, learned from other people in HR, learned from some absolutely world-class HR brilliant minds, and came back and I talked all about to the executive team and all about to my team about this experience and what it did. And so, I think that's been a cool part of it. Our HR leadership team, it's, they share that passion. And so we're always encouraging our team to pursue those certifications. It's not necessarily about the 3 letters behind your name, but it is about the confidence that you get when you study for a test and you pass the test and you say, see, I know what I'm talking about. So, and I think in construction, especially, not just my background, but the industry I work in, things are changing so fast. And if we're building today the same way we were building 20 years ago, we'd be obsolete, because things just have to work differently as we grow and change as an industry. So I think it's partially what's ingrained in me that causes me to work hard at continuing to develop, but it's also what the construction industry absolutely demands, that helps to kind of set the stage. And I've had that conversation with several employees. Maybe it's a superintendent who's at the highest level and they're like, why do I need to keep, I'm just going to be in this role. And I don't have another place I want to get to. And that's always my answer to them is, well, we're building a lot differently today than we built 20 years ago. So that's why we have to keep learning and growing, even if we're in a role we want to be in for a long time, or we don't want to promote. Things are changing around us, and we have to be learning and growing as well.
Yeah, that stagnation is where good things go to the graveyard. And there were 2 things that I want to call out is, and the first part of your answer is the perfect answer, which is I modeled it. Like you've done it. And if you do it, then the team says, okay, I can carve out time to have a mentor, or I can ask for a coach, or I can ask for a thing because I want it. And I'm not going to be shocked that Krista's not going to be shocked that I'm asking for this level of engagement. And if you're doing it, it's easier for the rest of the team to be able to do that as well. And the second is the business demanded it, right? The industry that you are in, every industry specifically, but construction right now, and I'll loop in the life sciences where we also work a lot within, is changing every week, and what's happening on a geopolitical landscape is going to impact construction, and what's happening. You have to have that business acumen, and some of that is, okay, I'm really confident on the HR X, Y, and Z, but I see a gap in my business acumen about why we go after that type of project or why we don't go after it. And the ability to be able to tie those two things together is really what can make a powerhouse team when you build those skill sets together as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, Krista, we've got to get to the rapid fire questions. This is 4 questions, rapid fire answers, 30 seconds apiece. The end of the year, we're going to put them all together. I give bonus points for answers, and I will maybe shame if we go over 30 seconds, but only if it happens more than once. So, the first question, what is one leadership habit that you rely on every day, no matter what?
Prioritization. I would just say, as executives over broad functions, there are a million things we can be plugging into on any given day, but we always have to be discerning on what requires our level of involvement versus what can be handled somewhere else and can be growing somebody else. So I think that cognizance of working at the right level and on the most business critical high value initiatives would lead me to say prioritization.
Absolutely. And 35 plus episodes, nobody else has said prioritization is number one. That is a fantastic answer. I absolutely love it. Bonus points are given for question number 1. Okay. Question number 2. What is the most underrated skill that a leader needs in order to be successful today?
I'm going to say communication, and I'm sure you have heard that before.
It's a great answer.
A great deal of my job is communicating, whether that be messages downstream, advising upstream, communicating to my team where the business is going, talking to employee base, talking to leaders. I mean, once you're in a leadership type capacity, it's more about your ability to rally the troops and make sure everybody's informed than doing the tasks day in and day out. So probably not a huge shock, but it is communication for sure.
Hey, within the world of communication, we said it earlier, say it once, say it again. If every single leader answered with the word communication, it still wouldn't be communicated enough. And we need to be able to do it. Question number 3 is on the flip side of this. What is one thing that you believe great leaders should stop doing?
This is a good question. I would say failing to embrace their own humanity. So, trying to seem like I've got it all, there are no issues here. I think when leaders don't acknowledge their own missteps and talk about those things, you've created a culture of pride and self over team, and then you have unintentionally encouraged other people to hide their mistakes or to not be transparent about potential issues. And I think about, especially in construction, right? It's a high stakes environment, and we've got to have a culture of acknowledging potential issues, surfacing those early, and not blowing past stop signs. So I think leaders have to embrace their own humanity. They'll be better for it, and they'll create the right culture in doing so.
That might be the best answer I've gotten. And this isn't me saying this after the recording. This isn't me saying this after the recording. I'm live on air right now. That might be the best answer we have gotten. That will be a LinkedIn snippet. Absolutely. I've never thought about it in that way in terms of embracing the humanity. But to your point, being able to raise the hand and admit, hey, I don't have the answer, or I thought I did, and now I'm thinking maybe we don't. Let's get together. And when you're in that leadership position, you have to give yourself a little bit of grace that you are not the only one who has the answers. There are others that have the answer as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
All right. That was awesome. That was a great answer. Question number 4.
Yep.
What's the best leadership advice that you've ever received?
I would say that building strength under you is the key to your success as a leader, which now seems very basic to me. But when I started in my leadership journey, again, I thought I had to have all the answers. I have to be the one that knows everything about everything. And it's like, no, our jobs as leaders is to build strong teams, period. And everybody under me should be the expert at what they do. They should know more than me about their space. That means I built a great team and I've been successful. So I think it's that You have to build strength under you. That's what makes you a successful leader, not being the expert at everything.
Yeah, I adore that. It's been a hot button topic. Our episode that came out today on May 11th is with an individual named Lisa Caliclio, who is the Chief Human Resources Officer at WCG Clinical. And a lot of the commentary there was about the ability as a leader to be able to say, I don't know. And I'm going to go and I'm going to interact with the person who does know on my team because I hired them for that reason. And we're going to work together. And we reserve the right to get smarter on a day-to-day basis and continuously learn. So, so good. You get 3 bonus points. Whatever scale that is, it's really good. It's really good. 3 out of the 4 answers being uncommon for the 40 episodes on the Activating Greatness podcast thus far is awesome. And it's a testament to how great this episode has been. Our final section is what we call positive gossip, which was a term coined by one of our guests, Tony Burkhardt, over at Pfizer Center 1, where, hey, we need to shine some light on some incredible human beings, and we need to talk about them behind their backs in a really positive way. So, Krista, who is somebody who is a leader, either inside your organization or somebody that you've worked with or somebody that you admire that you believe that we should interview next? Someone doing meaningful work that the Activating Greatness audience can learn from on a future episode.
Yes. I've already hinted at him, but my mentor, Al Berardi, is somebody that I would give you. He is a brilliant, visionary, courageous HR leader. He ran McCarthy HR for maybe 15 years or so. And now he does consulting work. He's also teaching a course at Boston College. He's worked for some world-class HR organizations and just done some great work. So he would be a very good person to invite on your podcast.
I love it. Well, it's one of my favorite things to be able to pull the snippet out of the guest hyping up another individual and then sending them the video and saying, see how nice they're talking about you. This is so much fun. And so we'll get that video over to him. And it sounds like he would be somebody that the Activating Greatness audience would learn a lot from. And so are you, Krista. I knew we would have fun. I knew there would be a lot of tokens for people to be able to pull, but this has been 47 minutes of so much fun, so many action items for people to be able to take and actually implement. I loved how we talked about continuous learning. I loved how we talked about the team structure and how to really grow into the business driver as an organization within HR. What's your final takeaway? If you had to give somebody the 30-second synopsis, I'll give you the microphone one more time. You've had a couple of mic drops, but what's the thing that you would want them to take away from a conversation like this?
I mean, I think just, we have a voice in a business that no one else has, and we have inputs in a business that no one else has. We've seen it all from all areas. We see what's great. We see what needs work. We know the business side. We know the human side. And so I think sometimes as HR people, we're humble, but the truth is that we have a vantage point that no one else has, and we need to make sure that we're using that voice to really continue to showcase what HR is and what it can do in a business.
Ooh. I love that's where you went. And I feel like a 2027 episode looking forward into the year about HR as a business driver and really just putting an emphasis on that might be in your inbox in the fall as I'm trying to convince you to come back on for a second episode of Activating Greatness.
I love that.
Krista,
this is so fun. Thank you.
Seriously, this was a blast. Everybody that's listening right now, you have probably thought, wow, this is a great episode. Go connect with Krista on LinkedIn. Let her know that the Activating Greatness podcast is where you found her. Tell her what you loved about her episode. I know you think that this was a fantastic listen, so make sure that you leave a review. You can rate it 5 stars on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcast. Somehow, some way, we are still on pace for 80 episodes here in 2026. And Krista's in the mid 30s when we're recording this today. The only reason we're able to do that is because of the unbelievable guests like Krista, but also the audience that we continue to hear from and the feedback that we're getting on a daily basis as we release episodes every Monday and every Thursday. And even though it's been great, I still got to prove that it works. So you leaving a little 5-star review and commenting and connecting with Krista, it goes a long way for us as we go forward. And it goes a long way for us building this activating greatness community, which is really built up of leaders who refuse to settle for good enough. So Krista, one last time, really appreciate you taking the time today and sharing your expertise with us.
Thank you so much, Alec. It's been fun.
Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Activating Greatness, and we'll see you on the next episode.